Amin Dada Ume was a Ugandan military officer and politician who served as the third president of Uganda from 1971 to 1979. He ruled as a military dictator and is considered one of the most brutal despots in modern world history. Amin did not write an autobiography, and he did not authorize an official written account of his life. There are discrepancies regarding when and where he was born. Most biographical sources claim that he was born in either Koboko or Kampala around 1925. Other unconfirmed sources state Amin's year of birth from as early as 1923 to as late as 1928. Amin's son Hussein has stated that his father was born in Kampala in 1928. According to some sources, Amin was the son of Andreas Nyabire. Nyabire, a member of the Kakwa ethnic group, converted from Roman Catholicism to Islam in 1910 and changed his name to Amin Dada. He named his firstborn son after himself. Abandoned by his father at a young age, Amin Dada Ume grew up with his mother's family in a rural farming town in northwestern Uganda. Amin's mother was Asa Ata, an ethnic Lugbara, and a traditional herbalist who treated members of Buganda royalty, among others. Some sources have also described Amin as being of mixed Kakwa-Nubian origin. In 1946, he joined the King's African Rifles of the British Colonial Army as a cook. He rose to the rank of lieutenant, taking part in British actions against Somali rebels and then the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. Uganda gained independence from the United Kingdom in 1962, and Amin remained in the army, rising to the position of major and being appointed commander of the Uganda Army in 1965. He became aware that Ugandan President Milton Obote was planning to arrest him for misappropriating army funds, so he launched the 1971 Ugandan coup and declared himself president. During his years in power, Amin shifted from being a pro-Western ruler enjoying considerable support from Israel to being backed by Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, Zaire's Mobutu Sese Seko, the Soviet Union, and East Germany. In 1972, Amin expelled Asians, a majority of whom were Indian Ugandans, leading India to sever diplomatic relations with his regime. As Amin's rule progressed into the late 1970s, there was increased unrest against his persecution of certain ethnic groups and political dissidents, along with Uganda's very poor international standing due to Amin's support for the terrorist hijackers in Operation Entebbe. He then attempted to annex Tanzania's Kagera region in 1978. The Tanzanian president Julius Nyerere ordered his troops to invade Uganda in response. Tanzanian army and rebel forces successfully captured Kampala in 1979 and ousted Amin from power. Amin went into exile, first in Libya, then Iraq, and finally in Saudi Arabia, where he lived until his death in 2003. Amin's rule was characterized by rampant human rights abuses, including political repression, ethnic persecution, extrajudicial killings, as well as nepotism, corruption, and gross economic mismanagement. International observers and human rights groups estimate that between 100,000 and 500,000 people were killed under his regime. In 1965, Prime Minister Milton Obote and Amin were implicated in a deal to smuggle ivory and gold into Uganda from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Amin led an attack on the Kabaka's palace and forced Mutesa into exile to the United Kingdom, where he remained until his death in 1969. Amin retaliated against the attempted invasion by Ugandan exiles in 1972 by purging the Uganda army of Obote supporters, predominantly those from the Acholi and Lango ethnic groups. In July 1971, Lango and Acholi soldiers had been massacred in the Jinja and Imbarara barracks. By early 1972, some 5,000 Acholi and Lango soldiers, and at least twice as many civilians, had disappeared. The victims soon came to include members of other ethnic groups, religious leaders, journalists, artists, senior bureaucrats, judges, lawyers, students and intellectuals, criminal suspects, and foreign nationals. In this atmosphere of violence, many other people were killed for criminal motives or simply at will. Bodies were often dumped into the River Nile. The killings, motivated by ethnic, political, and financial factors, continued throughout Amin's 8 years in control. The exact number of people killed is unknown. An estimate compiled by exile organizations with the help of Amnesty International puts the number killed at 500,000. Amin's bizarre behavior derives partly from his tribal background. Like many other warrior societies, the Kakwa, Amin's tribe, are known to have practiced blood rituals on slain enemies. These involve cutting a piece of flesh from the body to subdue the dead man's spirit, or tasting the victim's blood to render the spirit harmless. Such rituals still exist among the Kakwa. Amin's practices do not stop at tasting blood. On several occasions, he has boasted to those that were close to him that he has eaten human flesh. Among the most prominent people killed were Benedicto Kiwanuka, a former prime minister and chief justice, Janani Luwum, the Anglican archbishop, Joseph Mubiru, the former governor of the Central Bank of Uganda, Frank Kalamuzo, the vice-chancellor of Makerere University, Byron Kawadwa, a prominent playwright, and two of Amin's own cabinet ministers, Erinayo Wilson Oriema and Charles Oboth Ofumbi. Amin survived 8 attempted coups. Amin's military was largely a mercenary force. Half the soldiers were South Sudanese and 26% Congolese, with only 24% being Ugandan, mostly Muslim and Kakwa. We are determined to make the ordinary Ugandan master of his own destiny, and above all, to see that he enjoys the wealth of his country. Our deliberate policy is to transfer the economic control of Uganda into the hands of Ugandans for the first time in our country's history. Idi Amin on the persecution of minorities. Amin seized power in a military coup on the 25th of January 1971, while Obote was attending a Commonwealth Summit meeting in Singapore. Troops loyal to Amin sealed off Entebbe International Airport and took Kampala. Soldiers surrounded Obote's residence and blocked major roads. A broadcast on Radio Uganda accused Obote's government of corruption and preferential treatment of the Lango region. Cheering crowds were reported in the streets of Kampala after the radio broadcast. Amin, who presented himself a soldier, not a politician, declared that the military government would remain only as a caretaker regime until new elections, which would be held when the situation was normalized. He promised to release all political prisoners. On the 2nd of February 1971, 1 week after the coup, Amin declared himself President of Uganda, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Uganda Army Chief of Staff, and Chief of Air Staff. He suspended certain provisions of the Ugandan Constitution and soon instituted an advisory defense council composed of military officers with himself as the chairman. Amin ruled by decree. Over the course of his rule, he issued approximately 30 decrees. Obote took refuge in Tanzania, having been offered sanctuary there by the Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere. Obote was soon joined by 20,000 Ugandan refugees fleeing Amin. The exiles attempted but failed to regain Uganda in 1972 through a poorly organized coup attempt. Throughout the first year of his presidency, Amin received key military and financial support from the United Kingdom and Israel. In July 1971, he visited both countries and asked for advanced military equipment, but the states refused to provide hardware unless the Ugandan government paid for it. Amin decided to seek foreign support elsewhere, and in February 1972, he visited Libya. Amin denounced Zionism, and in return, Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi pledged Uganda an immediate $25 million loan to be followed by more lending from the Libyan-Ugandan Development Bank. Over the following months, Amin successively removed Israeli military advisors from his government, expelled all other Israeli technicians, and finally broke diplomatic relations. Gaddafi also mediated a resolution to long-standing Ugandan-Sudanese tensions, with Amin agreeing to stop backing Anyanya rebels in southern Sudan and instead recruit the former guerrilla fighters into his army. The United Kingdom and Israel ceased all trade with Uganda, but this commercial gap was quickly filled by Libya, the United States, and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union quickly became Amin's largest arms supplier, sending Uganda tanks, jets, artillery, missiles, and small arms. By 1975, it was estimated that the Soviets had provided Amin's government with $12 million in economic assistance and $48 million in arms. Amin also sent several thousand Ugandans to Eastern Bloc countries for military, intelligence, and technical training, especially Czechoslovakia. In December 1973, Amin launched a sarcastic Save Britain Fund during the 1973-1975 recession to save and assist our former colonial masters from economic catastrophe, while offering emergency food supplies and urging Ugandans to donate. In June 1976, Amin allowed an Air France airliner from Tel Aviv to Paris, hijacked by two members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine External Operations and two members of the German Revolutionäre Exile, to land at Entebbe airport. The hijackers were joined there by three more. Soon after, 156 non-Jewish hostages who did not hold Israeli passports were released and flown to safety, while 83 Jews and Israeli citizens, as well as 20 others who refused to abandon them, continued to be held hostage. In the subsequent Israeli rescue operation, codenamed Operation Thunderbolt, popularly known as Operation Entebbe, on the night of 3-4 July 1976, a group of Israeli commandos flew in from Israel and seized control of Entebbe airport, freeing nearly all the hostages. 3 hostages died during the operation, and 10 were wounded. 7 hijackers, about 45 Ugandan soldiers, and 1 Israeli soldier, Yoni Netanyahu, the commander of the unit, were killed. A 4th hostage, 75-year-old Dora Bloch, an elderly Jewish Englishwoman who had been taken to Mulago Hospital in Kampala before the rescue operation, was subsequently murdered in reprisal. The incident further soured Uganda's international relations, leading the United Kingdom to close its High Commission in Uganda. In retaliation for Kenya's assistance in the raid, Amin also ordered the killing of hundreds of Kenyans living in Uganda. Uganda, under Amin, embarked on a large military buildup, which raised concerns in Kenya. Early in June 1975, Kenyan officials impounded a large convoy of Soviet-made arms to Uganda at the port of Mombasa. Tension between Uganda and Kenya reached its climax in February 1976, when Amin announced that he would investigate the possibility that parts of southern Sudan and western and central Kenya, up to within 32 kilometers of Nairobi, were historically a part of colonial Uganda. The Kenyan government responded with a stern statement that Kenya would not part with a single inch of territory. Amin backed down after the Kenyan army deployed troops and armored personnel carriers along the Kenya-Uganda border. Amin's relations with Rwanda were tense, and during his tenure, he repeatedly jeopardized its economy by denying its commercial vehicles transit to Mombasa and made multiple threats to bomb Kigali. In January 1989, Amin left his exile without authorization by the Saudi Arabian government and flew alongside one of his sons to Zaire. There, he intended to mobilize a rebel force to reconquer Uganda, which was engulfed in another civil war at the time. The rest of his family stayed in Jeddah. Despite using a false Zairean passport, Amin was easily recognized upon arriving with Air Zaire at Njili Airport and promptly arrested by Zairean security forces. The Zairean government reacted unfavorably to Amin's arrival and attempted to expel him from the country. At first, Saudi Arabia refused to allow him to return, as its government was deeply offended that he had abused their hospitality by leaving without permission. The Zairean government wanted neither to extradite Amin to Uganda, where the ex-president faced murder charges, nor keep him in Zaire, thereby straining international relations. As a result, Amin was initially expelled to Senegal, from where he was supposed to be sent to Saudi Arabia, but the Senegalese government sent him back to Zaire when Saudi Arabia continued to refuse Amin a visa. Following appeals by Moroccan King Hassan II, the Saudi Arabian government finally relented and allowed Amin to return. In return, Amin had to promise to never again participate in any political or military activities, nor give interviews. He consequently spent the remainder of his life in Saudi Arabia. In the final years of his life, Amin reportedly ate a fruitarian diet. His daily consumption of oranges earned him the nickname Dr. Jaffa among Saudi Arabians. On 19 July 2003, Amin's fourth wife, Nalongo Medina, reported that he was in a coma and near death at the King Faisal Specialist Hospital and Research Center in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, from kidney failure. She pleaded with the Ugandan president, Yoweri Museveni, to allow him to return to Uganda for the remainder of his life. Museveni replied that Amin would have to answer for his sins the moment he was brought back. Amin's family eventually decided to disconnect life support, and Amin consequently died at the hospital in Jeddah on 16 August 2003. He was buried in Ruwais Cemetery in Jeddah in a simple grave, without any fanfare. Over the course of his career, Amin gained numerous nicknames, many of them derogatory, such as Big Daddy, affectionate nickname, the Machete, attributed to Ugandan security forces often murdering their victims with machetes, Butcher of Uganda, Butcher of Africa, Butcher of Kampala, Black Hitler,